Why do some women never grow up? And what does growing up even mean in a world where youth is idolized and maturity mistaken for dullness? This isn't about age. It's about arrested becoming. About the soul pausing at a stage that once promised love, validation, or freedom, and staying there, consciously or not. Carl Jung didn't write extensively about the woman who never grows up in the same way he spoke of the Peter Pan complex in men, but his theories whisper it between the lines. He called her the Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl, a feminine archetype, both enchanting and elusive, forever hovering above life instead of entering it fully. And in today's world, this Puella is thriving. We live in an age where perpetual youth is celebrated. Entire industries profit off keeping us adolescent in body and spirit. Adulting has become a meme, not a milestone. Women, in particular, are caught in a strange double bind, be mature enough to succeed, but youthful enough to be loved. Is it any wonder some never step fully into psychological adulthood? But this isn't a critique, it's a compassionate inquiry. To ask why some women never grow up is not to shame or pathologize. Is to understand what wounds, what myths, what unmet longings tether them to the past. What stories did they absorb? What roles were they asked to play princess, muse, ingenue that never taught them how to be whole? Historically, the tension between girlhood and womanhood has been a battlefield. From Psyche's mythic trials to Victorian ideals of femininity, societies have long drawn lines around when and how a woman should become. Often, this maturation was not a blossoming, but a burden. So some women, intuitively or defiantly, refused the rite of passage. They stayed somewhere in between. And that in-between place, that shadowed meadow between innocence and wisdom, is where we begin this exploration. Because to grow up is not to abandon lightness, is to weave it into depth, to descend into the roots of your psyche and still return with joy, to stop floating above life and finally bravely land. The notion of a woman not growing up might sound modern, a symptom of social media culture or millennial angst, but it has been with us since time began. Long before Carl Jung gave the Puella Aeterna her name, the essence of this archetype lived in myths, folklore, and social expectation. And for centuries, her presence has been misunderstood, at times romanticized, other times punished, but rarely explored with empathy. To understand the woman who resists growing up, we must first understand the world she grew in. Historically, womanhood has rarely belonged to women. In ancient cultures, girlhood was brief, often terminated by marriage contracts, societal roles, or motherhood. In ancient Greece, a girl could be married by age 12, often to a much older man. Her worth? Tied not to her mind or spirit, but to her dowry, her virginity, her obedience. To become a woman was to step into a predefined costume, stitched by culture and sealed by law. In many Eastern traditions, a similar theme persisted. In Confucian thought, a woman passed through 3 obediences to father, husband, and son, leaving little room for individuation. Growing up, for many, meant disappearing into the role assigned. So what happens to the psyche when maturity equals erasure? The psyche resists. It hides. It defers. And so the eternal girl is born not as a shallow creature, but as a survivor of a system that never welcomed her fullness. Fast forward to the Middle Ages and Renaissance, and we see the Puella dressed in silk and melancholy. Think of Ophelia Hamlet's delicate love interest, more symbol than person. She floats, innocent and tragic, never allowed to mature into complexity. Or consider the fairy tale princesses Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White. All passive, waiting, dreaming their transformation into woman, dependent on being chosen by a man. The girl is suspended in time, and her growth is contingent on external validation. Even literature of the 19th and 20th centuries carries this undercurrent. In Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, we see a protagonist who does grow up, but only through suffering, exile, and deep inner work. Yet side characters like Blanche Ingram or Bertha Mason represent arrested development in different guises, the coquette and the madwoman, both trapped by societal pressures around femininity. Carl Jung, observing these recurring themes, identified a pattern. While he is better known for the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy, who avoids responsibility in favor of eternal adventure, the feminine counterpart is just as potent. The Puella Aeterna is creative, idealistic, spontaneous, and radiant. But she is also disconnected from her body, from structure, from commitment. She fears being trapped, aging, or losing herself to routine. She is not a villain. She is a symbol of a psyche wounded in the transition from innocence to authenticity. Historically, we have seen cultures elevate this eternal girl while simultaneously punishing her. Hollywood, for example, has glamorized the youthful woman, the ingenue, for decades. From Audrey Hepburn's wide-eyed elegance to the manic pixie dream girl trope of the 2000s, the media has canonized a version of femininity that resists depth in favor of charm. Youth is beauty. Maturity is invisible. And yet, at the same time, society criticizes women who fail to settle down or take life seriously. The same woman who is adored at 25 for her free spirit is judged at 40 for her failure to grow up. It's a contradiction that carves deep wounds. What's changed over time? Superficially, quite a bit. Today, women have more choices than ever. They can pursue careers, delay marriage, choose child-free lives, embrace therapy, and seek spiritual growth. But the psychological inheritance hasn't vanished. Many women still internalize the belief that stepping into power means becoming hard, unlikable, or masculine. So they hover between roles, staying charming, spontaneous, agreeable, afraid that full maturity might cost them love, desirability, or community. What hasn't changed is the yearning. The yearning to be whole, not just youthful, not just wise, but integrated. A woman who has grown without leaving parts of herself behind. This is where Jung's insights become not just useful, but revolutionary. Because he didn't tell us to abandon the Puella. He invited us to dialogue with her. To ask, why are you afraid to grow? What did you lose when you first stepped into the world of adults? What would maturity look like if it weren't about conformity, but about depth? This historical context isn't meant to explain away modern behavior, but to ground it. To remind us that no psyche unfolds in a vacuum. The woman who resists growing up may not be immature, she may be reacting to a story that told her maturity was a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if growth was not the end of beauty, freedom, or magic, but their deepening? To truly understand the woman who never quite grows up, we must look beneath the surface past age, past behavior, into the intricate architecture of the psyche. This isn't about immaturity or laziness. It's about unconscious patterns, archetypal forces, and the soul's attempt to protect itself through postponement. Carl Jung believed that within every psyche lies a cast of characters, archetypes, ancient energies that shape how we relate to life. Among them, the Puella Aeterna, or eternal girl, plays a complex role. She is youthful, emotionally intuitive, idealistic, often highly spiritual, but she fears grounding. She avoids the descent into life's complexities. She floats. In Jungian terms, the Puella is what's known as a complex, a cluster of feelings, memories, and instincts formed by unresolved experiences in childhood. These complexes aren't pathological unless they dominate the personality. And many women carry this Puella energy not as a flaw, but as a wound that was never given space to heal. Psychologically, this archetype may stem from a developmental freeze, often linked to early childhood experiences where responsibility, grief, or rejection felt overwhelming. If a girl grows up in an environment where being pleasing, cute, or easygoing earns her love and safety, she may learn to stay in that role. The moment she tries to assert independence or deeper emotional needs, she may be shamed, ignored, or even punished. And so, part of her psyche stops developing. She becomes in part frozen in time. This concept parallels what trauma therapists today call arrested development, when emotional growth is halted by overwhelming circumstances. Modern psychology understands now what mystics once sensed: not all parts of us grow at the same rate. A woman can be 35, highly intelligent, competent in her job, and yet carry a 13-year-old inside her who panics when intimacy gets too deep. That 13-year-old may have learned that closeness meant abandonment. So she stays light, breezy, uncommitted. Not because she's flaky, but because she's afraid. There's also the influence of attachment theory, particularly anxious or avoidant styles. The Puella often exhibits avoidant traits, resisting commitment, craving novelty, avoiding emotional heaviness. But this isn't shallowness, it's defense. Her nervous system learned to equate stability with suffocation or disappointment. So she flies not because she's free, but because she never learned to land safely. Compare this to Jung's concept of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. Jung didn't see maturity as growing out of youthfulness, but integrating it. The Puella doesn't need to be exiled, she needs to be met, understood, reparented. When we suppress the eternal girl, she becomes a saboteur. When we listen to her, she becomes a guide. Interestingly, the Puella also has a mythic mirror in classical archetypes. In Greek mythology, She is Persephone, the maiden stolen into the underworld, caught between two worlds, the flower-filled innocence of spring and the dark wisdom of Hades' realm. Persephone's story is not just about trauma, but transformation. She must descend to rise. Likewise, in Sufi mysticism, there's a recurring theme of the beloved who remains elusive, playful, divine, representing the soul that must eventually surrender to union with the real. The eternal girl, like the Sufi beloved, is not lost, she is on a journey. But unlike the Sufi path, where surrender leads to growth, our modern Puella often avoids the descent. She fears losing herself in the process. This resistance is echoed in modern culture. Today's society sells us idealism as identity. We're told to manifest, vibe high, cut off toxic people, all of which can be empowering. But when these messages are divorced from shadow work and emotional responsibility, they reinforce avoidance. They validate a kind of spiritual bypassing, where discomfort is labeled low vibration rather than an invitation to heal. Yet healing is not about abandoning joy. It's about finding a joy that includes depth. So, how do we work with the Puella, not against her? Jung suggested that we need to move toward integration, not eradication. The goal isn't to kill the inner child, it's to raise her. To let her grow while keeping her wonder alive. This means facing grief, unmet needs, and fear of abandonment. It means unlearning the belief that to grow up is to become bitter or boring. It's not. To mature is to discover freedom within commitment, beauty within limits, playfulness within purpose. The Puella doesn't need to disappear, she needs to evolve. And she can with guidance, with compassion, and with the courage to descend. There's a quiet sorrow that accompanies a life lived in the air, always drifting, never landing. When a woman remains in the psychological space of the Puella Aeterna, the consequences are often invisible at first. On the surface, everything may seem luminous. She's charming, magnetic, spontaneous, full of potential. But over time, the shine fades. The hollowness sets in, because a life that never roots eventually runs out of sky. The consequences of resisting growth are not always dramatic. They accumulate gently, like dust gathering in corners. But their impact is deeply felt, in relationships, in identity, in confidence, in purpose. Fragmented identity. When the eternal girl dominates the psyche, a woman may struggle to form a stable sense of self. She adapts, mirrors, charms, becoming who she thinks others want her to be. But when alone, she may feel like a shapeshifter with no core. This is not deceit, it's survival. She learned early that love was conditional, that being pleasing, light, or easygoing kept her safe. But living without a rooted identity leads to emotional fatigue. Constant self-editing becomes exhausting. And deep down, there's often a fear. If I stop performing, will I still be loved? Shallow or repetitive relationships. In love, the Puella often gravitates toward passion over depth. She is drawn to excitement, novelty, and intensity, but struggles when the honeymoon fades and real intimacy begins. Commitment can feel like entrapment. Stability feels dull. She might subconsciously sabotage healthy partnerships, chasing emotionally unavailable lovers or fleeing when things get too real. This isn't about cruelty, it's about fear. True intimacy demands that we reveal our vulnerabilities, our shadows. But the eternal girl has spent a lifetime avoiding the descent. So instead, she flutters from one romance to another, never quite touching the ground. And over time, this leaves a mark. A cycle of longing and regret, of what could have beens and almost, career drift and unrealized potential. Professionally, the Puella is often talented, even brilliant, but struggles with follow-through. She may start many projects, chase big ideas, but falter when structure, consistency, or patience is required. Long-term planning can feel suffocating. Hierarchies may feel demeaning. She might bounce between jobs, reinvent herself constantly, or avoid choosing a path altogether. On the surface, she's multi-passionate. Underneath, there's often a fear of failure or success. Because success means responsibility, visibility, accountability, things she was never taught to hold. Over time, this unfulfilled potential breeds self-doubt, a haunting sense that she's behind not in years, but in integration. That she's always almost there, but never quite arriving. Emotional volatility and inner loneliness. The Puella archetype is tied to heightened emotion, joy, sorrow, rage, ecstasy. But when unintegrated, these emotions lack a container. Small things feel huge. Feedback feels like rejection. Disappointments become catastrophes. Without the inner structure that comes with maturity, she is tossed by every wave. And beneath it all, a persistent loneliness. Because no matter how many people orbit her, there's a part of her that remains unknown even to herself. She may long for deep connection but fear being truly seen. So she stays partially hidden, partially light, always slightly out of reach. This loneliness isn't about lacking company, it's about lacking mirrors that reflect her full self, not just the persona. Spiritual and existential discontent. Even on the spiritual path, the Puella can get stuck. She may chase mystical highs, visions, or gurus, but avoid the slower, deeper work of integration. Jung called this inflation, when the ego identifies with archetypal energies but hasn't earned their depth through lived experience. In spiritual bypassing, growth becomes performance. Enlightenment becomes another escape. True transformation, as mystics and psychologists alike have said, requires a descent. Into the shadow, into grief, into the body. The Puella fears this descent, yet aches for what lies at the bottom of it, wholeness. A glimpse through myth. Myth offers haunting mirrors for these consequences. Take the story of Eurydice, the wife of Orpheus. When she dies and descends into the underworld, Orpheus comes to rescue her, but fails to follow the rules. He looks back too soon. She vanishes. Some interpret this myth as a failure of trust. But through the Jungian lens, it's also a metaphor for failing to integrate the shadow to retrieve the buried parts of the self. When we turn away from the underworld prematurely, when we refuse the descent, we lose access to our full self. Likewise, the Puella who stays in the upper world all light, all flight eventually loses touch with her power. Because power is forged in the dark. In knowing, not just dreaming. But this isn't where the story ends. The Puella is not doomed to drift forever. She can become the woman who dances with gravity instead of fighting it. But it requires the courage to feel what was once unbearable, to remember what was once forgotten, to grow what was once abandoned. The question isn't, why won't she grow up? The real question is, what does growing up mean, and can it feel like coming home, rather than losing oneself? For the woman who resonates with the Puella Aeterna, maturity isn't about abandoning the girl within. It's about integrating her magic with grounded wisdom. It's the art of becoming layered, of holding both lightness and depth, flight and root, dream and discipline. Carl Jung never asked us to kill the inner child. He asked us to relate to her consciously, to reparent her, to lead her lovingly into adulthood, not by force, but by invitation. This section is just that, an invitation. Let's explore practices, psychological, spiritual, and practical, that help the eternal girl grow without erasing her soul. Inner dialogue, meeting the girl within. Start by naming her. The part of you who avoids grounding, who fears commitment, who panics at the idea of being ordinary. She's not your enemy, she's your story. Set aside time each week to write letters to her. Ask, what are you afraid will happen if we grow up? Who taught you that structure was suffocating? What kind of woman would feel safe to become? This is a form of active imagination, one of Jung's favorite methods. By speaking with your inner girl as a separate yet connected presence, you bring her out of the shadows. You make her feel seen. Journal prompt, if my Puella self could speak, what would she say about adulthood? About responsibility? About love? Body-based practices, rooting the spirit. The Puella lives in the sky in ideas, visions, what-ifs. To grow, she must descend into the body. Try somatic practices that bring awareness downward. Grounding meditations, visualize roots growing from your feet into the earth. Embodied movement, dance, yoga, or intuitive stretching, anything that keeps you in your body, not dissociated from it. Breath work, especially breath techniques that focus on the exhale, the letting go, the landing. As you do this, notice any resistance. The Puella may fear feeling too much. But each breath teaches her that the body is a home, not a cage. Cognitive rewiring, redefining maturity. Many Puella-identified women carry internalized beliefs like, if I commit, I'll lose my freedom. If I slow down, I'll disappear. If I grow up, I'll become boring. These are not facts, they're inherited scripts. Using cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or journaling, challenge these narratives. Where did I learn this? Is it still true for who I am now? What could maturity look like on my own terms? Replace old beliefs with integrated truths. For example, freedom includes rootedness. I get to choose my boundaries. Slowness deepens my presence. Maturity isn't boring, it's beautiful in its depth. Therapeutic spaces, reparenting in real time. Working with a trauma-informed therapist or Jungian analyst can be transformative. Therapy offers something the Puella rarely experienced growing up, a safe container. A place where she doesn't have to perform, charm, or disappear. In therapy, she can grieve, rage, reflect. She can learn that adult life isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Ask your therapist to help you explore. Early childhood dynamics. Who did you have to be to feel loved? Attachment styles. How do you react to closeness and distance? Shadow integration. What parts of yourself have been disowned? Through this reparenting, the Puella softens. She no longer needs to fly because the ground finally feels safe. Ancient wisdom. Letting myth guide the modern soul. In Sufi poetry, Rumi writes, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you." Spiritual traditions across the world offer practices that support integration. Stoicism teaches us to embrace discomfort with dignity. Journaling on impermanence, mortality, and the things we can control helps balance the Puella's aversion to structure. Sufism reminds us that longing is sacred, but it must lead us toward union, not fragmentation. Mythology gives symbolic maps. Persephone didn't stay underground. She returned wiser, fuller, queen of two worlds. Use myth not as escape, but mirror. Let archetypes illuminate your journey. Read stories of descent, of awakening, of complexity. Then ask, what season of my story am I in, and what kind of woman do I want to become? Rituals of structure, honoring the sacred in the simple. Structure doesn't have to be a prison. It can be poetry. Create gentle systems that honor your spirit without dulling it. Morning pages. Write 3 unfiltered pages daily to hear your soul. Weekly planning rituals. Light a candle, reflect on your goals, set small intentions. Commitment contracts. Choose one thing. A class, a routine, a project, and commit, not from fear but from love. Keep the rituals sacred, not as chores, but as containers for your creativity. Community and mentorship. Choosing mirrors who see you fully. The Puella often surrounds herself with enablers, people who love her sparkle, but not her substance. Growth requires different mirrors, ones who challenge, support, and reflect back the deeper self. Seek mentors who've walked the path of integration. Friends who value presence over performance. Partners who are not dazzled by your light, but drawn to your wholeness. Ask yourself, who in my life sees the grown woman in me and calls her forward with love? Progress, not perfection. Growth is messy. Some days you'll long for flight. Others, you'll feel joy in your roots. Let both be sacred. The Puella doesn't need to disappear. She needs to evolve. Her spontaneity can become playfulness. Her vision, purpose. Her sensitivity, wisdom. Real maturity is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more you, expanded, deepened, free. We live in a world that whispers, stay young, stay small, stay light. It sells us youth as the ultimate virtue, wrinkle-free, responsibility-free, endlessly becoming, never arrived. But Jung, with his quiet brilliance, invited us into a different truth. That the soul longs not to stay young, but to become whole. The Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl, is not a flaw. She is a stage, an archetype, a psychic voice. She dreams, she dances, she disrupts stale systems. She is the wild imagination of the soul before it is shaped. But if she refuses to grow, she becomes her own prison, a ghost of what could be, always circling, never landing. And so we return to the deeper question. What does it mean to grow up not in age, but in soul? It means stepping out of the fantasy and into form. It means grieving the illusion of perfect freedom and discovering the richer truth of chosen responsibility. It means turning toward the inner child with compassion, not shame. It means holding paradox, to dream and to do, to feel and to focus, to love and to stay. Growing up isn't a betrayal of magic. It's a deepening of it. It's realizing that the woman who dares to root can still fly, but now with direction. That the one who stops running can actually arrive. That depth doesn't dull the soul, it dignifies it. And so, to the women who have floated long enough, to the ones who feared the ground, who made themselves small to stay light, who ran from the mirror because it showed both youth and time, this is your call to return. To the body, to the shadow, to the truth, to the woman you've always been becoming. Carl Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you were praised for being, not who you performed to survive, but the integrated you, luminous, rooted, imperfect, whole. This journey is not fast, nor clean, nor linear. but it is holy, and it starts right here with a choice. So ask yourself softly, what would it look like to grow up, not in fear but in love? What kind of woman would I become if I believed maturity could be magical, not a loss, but a landing? Pause. Breathe. The girl within you may whisper, I'm not ready. But the woman beside her will smile and say, that's okay. We're going anyway. If this spoke to something buried inside you, a voice that's tired of floating, a soul that's ready to root, a woman ready to rise. Subscribe now and join a space where depth is honored, wholeness is the goal, and the journey inward is just as powerful as the path ahead. Each week, you'll receive reflections, tools, and ancient meets modern insights to help you grow not perfectly, but authentically. No fluff, no preaching, just soul-level conversations for the woman becoming. Subscribe, now your next evolution is waiting.